Hi, this is Veterans History Project. My name is Walter Little. It is March 18, 2016, and we're at Camp Withicum for the Women's Veterans Conference. And we have here with us today, in Clackamas, Oregon, we have with us today Jan McBride. Ms. McBride, welcome here. And you are originally from?
Hamilton, Ohio.
Where you grew up?
Yes.
And you attended high school? You took all the way through school, you were in Hamilton, Ohio?
Yes.
And when you got out of high school, did you join the military right away, or did you?
No, actually, I looked for work and I did some odd jobs, that type of thing. I did actually find a job for a few months, but most of the jobs were like dead-end jobs. And most of my friends were in college. But it's, college is really expensive. My next oldest sister had gone in the Air Force a couple of years before me, and she decided she was going to go to school on the GI Bill. So I thought, well, maybe I should look into that. So I joined about a year after high school.
Now, you came from a military family?
Yes.
So parents were military, grandparents?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
My dad's father was in World War II in the Army. My mom's father was in the Navy. My mom was in the Navy in World War II, and my dad was in the Army in World War II. Two of my dad's brothers were in World War II. They all at the same time. One was in the Marines, one was in the Navy. So Grandma had three blue stars hanging in her window. That was the sign that you had someone overseas during the war. And so it was pretty difficult to have three of your four sons gone to war. Fortunately, they all came home safely. My current husband was a Marine. He did 2 tours in Vietnam. And my husband has a son. Well, he's our son. Not together, but my husband has a son currently serving in the Army in Fort Bliss, Texas. And I have 2 sons from my previous marriage. One was Army and one was Marines.
So did you go into the military for the GI Bill then?
Well, I thought about it. I never did complete college because I was working full-time and I didn't have time to go to school full-time and work full-time. And I never did actually complete it. I went, to a couple of community colleges, but I never did actually finish it. I basically wanted to travel and get out of my hometown because it was a really small hometown and I wanted to see a little bit of the world.
So where'd you go to boot camp?
San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base.
And what time of year?
August.
Hot.
Yeah, it was like 117 degrees.
Hot, and let's see, Texas, that means snakes.
Not on the base.
Really? I don't think I've ever been any place in Texas that didn't have snakes. So after boot camp, you went where?
Biloxi, Mississippi, Keesler Air Force Base.
And what did you do there?
Went to school to be an administrative specialist.
And what is an administrative specialist?
It's basically clerical. You can do anything from just work in any kind of an office on any one of the Air Force bases to the typical outside job that you would qualify for is a postal clerk. So you could work in the base post office, you could do any kind of clerical work at any one of the bases.
And what were you doing?
When I landed at my permanent base, which was Mather Air Force Base outside of outside of Sacramento. Mm-hmm. Technically, it was Rancho Cordova, California. I landed in Civil Engineering Squadron in the base or in the squadron orderly room, which is basically where everybody comes in. They first get there, you sign them in and get all their paperwork ready and all of that stuff.
So it's basically a 9-to-5 job then?
Not really. It was supposed to be 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, but I always got there early, put the coffee pot on, got everything ready. I was responsible. I was the low man on the totem pole. When I first got there, I was an airman basic, which means slick sleeve, no stripes on your sleeve, anything like that. We had a buck sergeant, which was a 3-stripe sergeant.
No rockers.
Yeah. And then we had some civilian workers. And then we had my supervisor, who was a staff sergeant at the time, and our first sergeant, we called him first shirt. And my commander was a captain. And then we had three civil service workers. But I would always get there early and do all the stuff before everybody else because I liked it that way. And I usually stayed late because I didn't mind the extra work. It kept me busy and all of that. So I did the performance appraisals. I didn't do them. I would get a rough draft from one of the sergeants, and they would say, they would type up something or hand write up something, but they generally would have a lot of misspelled words and punctuation wasn't right and all that stuff. And so I would redo it and say, okay, is this what you really meant? And they would say, yeah, that sounds really good.
They didn't have spell checkers back then, did they?
Yeah, no. So then I would, if it met with their approval, then I would type it all up and get it signed and give it to the commander.
And what type of things were you in charge of then?
Well, when people would first come in, they had to go through me. I was like the receptionist.
So processing?
Yeah, pretty much. And then if anybody, the weird thing about it was, for whatever reason, if somebody got in trouble, they would always ship them to us because we had several different squadrons in the base. And for some reason, if somebody was like a mess up or whatever, they always got shipped to us.
How many people did you have on that base? What was the standard complement?
Oh my God, I don't remember. Probably 4,000 or 5,000.
That's quite a few.
Yes.
And how many did you normally process in a month?
Well, I didn't do the whole base. I just did for our squadron. And we had probably 250 or 300 in the squadron.
And how long does it take to process each individual then?
It depended on exactly what we were doing. Just to do the in-processing, it took about an hour.
About an hour each?
Yeah.
So that by itself kept you pretty busy.
Oh, yeah.
And then you had other responsibilities too besides just general processing?
Well, I did the in-processing, and then if somebody got in trouble, we had to have up an Article 15, which is reprimand. And it was the old-time typewriter thing. So you had like 5 copies, and if you had a mistake, you had to like correct each one. And so that had to be all done and have the commander sign it, and then up to his commander and all of that. Then we had drug testing because there was unfortunately a lot of drugs going around at that time, the early to mid 70s. So I got to be in charge of that. I didn't have to, help with the drug testing. I just had to schedule the drug testing. And then, like I said, with the performance appraisals, after I got them typed and everything, I had to go to the consolidated base personnel office and drop them off and pick up the ones when they got done with them, because the personnel office was in charge of processing all of them after they were typed up and signed and all that. And then they had to come back to be put back in the personnel files.
So you typed them up and filed them and everything then?
Yeah, pretty much.
So how long were you asleep then?
Well, got out of basic training like that, and went to Biloxi. And then on Christmas Eve, I got out of there in October, went to basic training, went home for Thanksgiving, November. Christmas Eve, I was sewing on my first stripe.
So now was somebody else making the coffee in the morning, or were you still doing it?
No, I was still a low man on the totem pole.
How long did that last?
Well, I told him I quit drinking coffee and could somebody else make it. And it was like, oh, okay, well, whoever eats there first. Well, I always got there first, so I just kept making coffee.
Well, how long were you in the military before you met your spouse?
Let me see. Probably about 10 months.
So you were stationed in the same place from the moment you landed until, yeah.
Well, what happened? It's a really sad story. I was trying to be a good Samaritan. I was dating a guy at the time, and in our barracks, there was a sign on the wall, and it says "Stuck in Shemya," which is that remote base in Alaska. It says "Stuck in Shemya needs mail," and I thought, okay, I can do that, because the guy I was dating was going to be sent to Shemya, and so I wrote to the guy, just, saying, okay, so this guy that I'm dating is going up there, and the guy that's stuck in Shemya, I wrote him a note, and he said he's coming to Mather. And I thought, well, this is great. I can help these two guys out, because this guy's going, this guy's coming, so they can meet each other and say, all right, so, this is what to expect when you get there, and this is what's going on down here around Sacramento. Well, it didn't work out so well, because the guy that was going, we were dating, we were not exclusive or anything like that. So the guy that's going up there tells, it's a long story. When the guy that came down, we started dating when he came down, but we weren't engaged or anything. We just, we came down. So anyway, the guy that went up was telling everybody up there that we were engaged. I'm like, no, we didn't say anything like that. So anyway, I got around that I was, a bad person and everything. And so I'm like, great. Because when the guy that came down, we met, we started dating and everything. Eventually we did get engaged, and got married. But it wasn't I was playing one against the other or anything like that. So it's, I don't know.
So regardless of the rumors, so you enlisted for 4 years.
Yes.
You met this individual after about 8 months. And then how long were you together before you decided to get married?
That's the scary thing. We were together 6 weeks. We got engaged. We were engaged for 6 weeks more, and then we got married. And I would not recommend that for anybody, because you can't really know, in my experience, you can't really know a person unless you know them a lot longer.
6 weeks is an awful short time.
Well, we got engaged after 6 weeks.
That's it, okay.
And then after we were engaged for 6 weeks, we got married. It wasn't actually going to be that short. We had talked about waiting until November. After the engagement, we were going to be married in November. But in California at that time, you still had to get a blood test. And okay, so we got this blood test, and it was only good for a certain length of time. Well, if we would have waited till November, we would have had to get blood tests all over again. So we thought, fine, we'll move it up to September. So that's why it was such a short period between the engagement and the wedding.
And as a consequence of that, you got pregnant?
Not as a consequence of that. I wanted to wait for a couple years to have kids. And he thought, oh no, we should start a family right away. Well, that wasn't a good idea either.
So what happened?
We started a family.
So you got pregnant?
I got pregnant.
And what happens when a woman gets pregnant and you're in the Air Force?
Well, you can request to get out right away, or at that time, in 73, you can say, I'd like to stay in until I'm 7 months pregnant, and then you actually had to get out, because you couldn't perform your duty. At that time, the regulations were, you couldn't perform your duties as stated in the regulations past 7 months. So they invited you to be discharged, basically.
So you were in the military then for how long?
20 months and...
Just shy of 2 years.
Yeah.
And you left because you were going to have a baby and your husband wanted you to?
Well, he was getting stationed in a different base, and he thought it would be easier for me to get out and accompany him as a dependent than to try to get travel orders to go with him.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does.
So you had a child, boy or girl,
Boy.
and you decided not to enter the military again?
Actually, I thought about it, and I called. We ended up leaving that base and eventually going to Hawaii. And when I was over there, I talked about going back in, at least, maybe in the reserve or something. And I called them, and they said, well, no, even at the young age of 27, you're too old. And I went, I was shocked. So, didn't work out.
So what did you do then?
Stayed at home and raised kids.
Your home raised kids. And your husband?
He got out after 2 tours. He was at not quite 8 years. And then he started working for different companies. And eventually we split up. And I went back to work because I had 2 little kids to support. And I ended up working for the state of Oregon for 26 years and just retired about a year ago.
And at some point you remarried?
I did. It'll be 22 years in June.
Congratulations.
Married. Thank you.
So, what effect would you say the military had on you? You didn't see combat, so PTSD probably wasn't real high on your list.
Actually, I was diagnosed with PTSD
Because of military?
because of my ex-husband.
Ah, that's not good. But the military, what effect did that have on you?
Well, I had a really good experience. I've heard a lot of other women didn't, well, a lot of people, period, veterans, but especially a lot of women have had a really horrible experience. I've heard some of them talk about it. I was treated really well. Of course, in some cases you have to command respect, but it doesn't always happen that way, and you can't always, trust people. But I just had a really good commander, and all the way up the chain of command, it just worked out really well for me, and I had a really good experience.
And you liked the base you were stationed at?
Yes.
What was that?
Well, there was a funny story about that. When I went in, I knew the recruiters because at that time, back in the late 60s, early 70s, they were trying to transition women into the military, and they had a quota to meet. You had to meet so many women going in at that time. They called them Women in the Air Force, or WAF, and they were trying to up the quota. So my sister already knew that she wanted to go in the military because she wanted to, go to school in the GI Bill when she got out.
This was your older sister?
Right. So she had gone to see the recruiters and everything. But they actually came out to the house, our house, and they sat down and they talked to my parents, and my sister was there, and she was a senior in high school, and I was only a sophomore, and they were kind of like eyeballing me, and I'm like, hey, I'm only a sophomore. But after getting to know both of the recruiters and everything, my sister was stationed, she was in communication squadron, like computers and IT and that kind of stuff. And she eventually got stationed in the Philippines. So every now and then, I would go up and talk to the recruiters and say, how she was doing and what was going on and that kind of thing, what I could, because she had a top secret clearance. So, she couldn't tell me much of anything. But anyway, I said, I've heard from her and that. And so I got to know them a little bit, and so I eventually decided to go in. And about a year after graduation, and so that's pretty much it.
What would you say you gained from the military?
Well, I gained experience. I had a little bit of office experience before I went in. I was a volunteer. I knew the secretary, the principal secretary at my high school. And so I volunteered summers to work in the office with her before I actually went to the high school. So I had a little bit of that experience. And so when I went in the military, I knew how to type and file and do all that kind of stuff. And just being around a lot of people, I mean, I had never been around a lot of the different ethnic groups before. And I knew a little bit of Spanish because one of our teachers in grade school was, she had married a husband who was Hispanic, and she taught us a little bit in second grade. So it came in handy when I was in San Antonio.
Yes, it would.
Because a lot of the girls in my squadron were Hispanic, or had Hispanic heritage. And so that was great to be around different ethnic groups and that type of thing. And, you know, I'd never been to the Alamo or down the Riverwalk and that type of thing, so I got to do that. I'd never been to the South. I was out on a date with a guy, and we were walking along the ocean outside of Biloxi, and in '69, Hurricane Camille came through, and there was still wreckage along the beach from that hurricane here to '72.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tell how damaging that was.
Yeah, it spreads damage quite a ways. You also had to have a change of environment. I don't think the summers in Ohio were all that hot, are they?
Well, sometimes it'd be 95 degrees and 95% humidity.
And in Texas, it'd get up to 112, but the humidity is not quite that high.
The humidity was bad. I know I had a friend who went to like church camp in the summer, and she, oh, it's really wonderful down there. When you're standing in the sun, it's 100 and whatever degrees, and the sweat is just trickling off of you, and you're in tension, and you cannot move. It's like, you know, I'm going to kill her when I get home. It's telling me it's not hot.
One of the slogans for the military was, join us and we'll make a man out of you, which we're hoping is not true in your case, but what would be true about that?
Well, it's funny because after the divorce, I went to like a marriage recovery or divorce recovery.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a seminar, it was like a group. And there was this gentleman who was talking to us, and there was, you know, we're a mixed group, men and women, and I'm sitting towards the back, and this guy gets up and he's saying something about like when young men are out, like in Africa, and young men are out in the bush, and they're out there and they're hunting a lion, and that's like they're like they become a man when they kill this lion or whatever. I'm waiting for it, and he's like, so in America, about the only thing we've got that's close to that is when you go in the military, and they go in a boy and they come out a man, and I'm like. And he's like, what? I'm like, well, you can't go in a man and come, or can't go in a boy and come out a man if you go in as a woman. And he's like, you know, the guy sitting next to me is just like cracking up. I'm like, yeah, because he knows that I'm a veteran, you know. Okay, yeah, well.
But boot camp does change you.
Well, not so much. It was really funny because Air Force at the time, mm-hmm. Air Force, and it's not boot camp, it's basic training.
Sorry, basic training.
Yes. It was a lot different because now before that and after that, I don't know. But I kept like, okay, when are we going to run the confidence course? When are we going to shoot weapons? We didn't do that. And I asked, okay, when are we going to do that? No, you're not going to have time. We're like, what? Well, we went and did, hair and makeup and all that stuff, and I'm like, what's up with that? And we didn't have to do KP. I'm like, okay. And they're like, we had to wash and launder and iron and do all that stuff, which I expected to do. But the guys got to send their uniforms out. I'm like, all right. But see, they did KP, and they did fire weapons, and they did the confidence course and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, well now the women do all the stuff that the guys do. And I'm like, well, okay, so how's come we're the only ones that didn't do that? I don't know if it was just for a brief time or what.
Well, you were non-combatants back then.
Right.
That doesn't mean you won't be exposed to enemy fire, you just won't have a rifle in your hand.
Right.
So that's probably why they thought they don't need to train you in that area, which I think is discriminatory. But you said the youngest of 4 sisters?
Yes.
And your older sister, did she make a career in the military?
No. She got married a couple years after high school and raised 4 kids. She worked for a while after high school. And then she got married, and then she had 4 kids. She worked a little bit in between the kids, but mostly she stayed home and raised kids, and she was happy with that.
But you had a sister 2 years older than you.
Yes.
That did go into the military, Air Force.
She's the one that went in the Air Force before I did.
Right, and did she make a career of it?
No.
No.
She like my husband, they had what they called an early out, and so she got out 6 months early. They either said, you either re-enlist or you get out. Because during that time, they either wanted a career person or they gave early outs.
They wanted a commitment.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about women being in combat?
I have kind of mixed feelings about it. I think, it's just like a civilian job. If you can do the job, then have at it. I mean, I don't think they should be discriminated against because they're women. But there's also the fact, if your battle buddy is 250 pounds and 6'3", and you're not, how are you going to pack them out?
Yeah.
How are you going to pack them out? I mean, it's common sense.
So what was it about the military that you liked the best?
Well, I really liked it a lot because we had there was a camaraderie, and even when you're out of basic training, you're at your permanent base and all that. I still, not today, but still sometimes a few years back, I would find myself, even in my office, it's a state office, and I would go to get something and I would say, oh, I forgot, whatever. And I would do an about face in the middle of the office. And people would just stare at me, and I'd say, hey, it's a lot faster.
It is.
And they're like, and I'd be walking down the street, and I would be out of step with myself or whatever, and I'd do a quick change. And they're like, or I'd be out of step with my husband or whatever, and he'd just look at me like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, it's more expedient that way. And sometimes I'd be walking down the street, and I'm like, 6 to the front and 3 to the rear, or whatever that, you've got the nickels.
6 to the front, 9 to the rear.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, and I couldn't keep up with him forever. I mean, he's got a bum knee from Vietnam, and I'm trying to keep up with him. And he's, 30-inch steps down there. Like, you're leaving me in the dust again. So we still have that military mindset type thing.
One of the things I've noticed about the military, especially for a young adult, is that a lot of things you have to worry about in the general public, such as paying rent, medical expenses, and stuff like that, are just things you get to take for granted while you're in the military.
Yeah.
So you have a great deal of stability in your income. Pretty much know what it may not be much, but you know what you're going to get paid, and all of your needs are pretty much met.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your highest rank?
Airman first class.
Airman first class, which is?
2 stripes.
2 stripes. So what would you recommend for your children? Would you recommend that they serve in the military, or?
They actually both did.
Did you recommend that?
Actually, I was so used to seeing kids, their friends and a lot of other people in society that were just living off their parents or living on welfare or something like that. And so we had the talk, and I said, you have 3 choices when you graduate, and you will graduate. I said, you can get a job, you can go to college, which you will be paying for with a job, or you can go in the military, but you're not going to stay home and live off your parents. And they both joined the military right out of high school.
And both of them same branch, or?
The oldest one went in the Army, and the youngest one went in the Marines.
And did you notice a change with them after basic?
Unfortunately, they were living with their dad at the time, after the divorce, they lived with me for about a year. And then they went to live with their dad for a while, and they ended up staying with their dad. That's a whole other story. And so they went in the service from him, from his house. So I didn't hear from him for a while. But, yeah,
Well,
close.
I appreciate you joining us today, Jan, and enjoyed your story. Thank you for joining us on Veterans History Project.
Thank you.